I'm Bob Graboyes, Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and I'm talking today with our guest, John Schull from Rochester Institute of Technology. Well, John was kind enough to provide me with this, which is a 3D printed prosthetic hand. And John built a worldwide consortium that pairs people who want to build these things and people who actually need them. So welcome, John. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit, a brief history of the hand?
In the 19th century, a hand like this made out of whalebone and metal was handcrafted. And so the idea has been around for a long time, but only a year ago was a design that was 3D printable, but involved the same basic mechanisms released on the internet. And at that point, I realized this was a really interesting opportunity, and I created a Google map in which I invited people who needed a hand to match themselves up with people who wanted a hand. And the map began to fill up, and so we created a community that would coordinate that. And it's been growing by about 10% a week ever since. And at 10% a week, we're up to 1,200 this week, and we'll be up to 1,300 next week.
Fantastic. People are often staggered by when they learn something about the cost structure of these hands versus a professionally made prosthetic hand. Why don't you tell us the comparison?
A commercial prosthetic arm is a very different kind of device. It's got motors, it has sensors, it has all sorts of things, but it costs about $30,000 to $50,000. This device has been compared favorably by some people who have one of each to that $40,000 device, and it is made of about $20 worth of materials and about 6 hours worth of labor, and our volunteers are giving them away for free.
What sort of people are in the network making these, and how does the process go on?
Well, it's one of the really interesting things is the diversity of people. This original 3D printed design was created by a carpenter who'd had an accident and a prop maker and puppeteer who was making hands move for other purposes. We have hobbyists, we have tinkerers, we have computer programmers, we have web developers, we have people who have and are interested in 3D printers. We have people who don't have and aren't interested in 3D printers, but are interested in children who need prosthetic hands. We have moms and we have kids. And interestingly, they're all collaborating and they're all contributing in really interesting ways to a collaborative design and development and building and fabrication and delivery and service process. The way it happens typically is that someone who needs a hand, or the parent of someone who needs a hand, becomes aware of us. They write us a note. One of our volunteers sends them an intake form, which explains that we're developing an experimental device, which they are free to evaluate, and includes a disclaimer. And we then typically pair that would-be recipient with a volunteer who will take their measurements and turn them into a 3D printed device, print the material, assemble the material, send it to them, often make adjustments so it's comfortable, and another kid has a hand.
How long is the turnaround?
Right now I would guess that the turnaround is on the order of weeks. In truth, it could happen in a day or two, but no one is being paid, and it often takes several days for each step to just get done because people have busy lives, and that's how it goes.
One of the things that fascinates me, here at Mercatus, we are fascinated with ideas, with markets, with networks of information, and the way products and ideas bubble up out of nowhere. I know that this hand doesn't look very much like its earliest predecessor models. Can you talk about the evolutionary aspects of design and how that happens?
Well, if you look up the original hand, which is known as the robo hand, it has a very mechanical, square, non-organic shape. over time, we've evolved a number of variations, and this is only one of several variations. The most popular model is known as the cyborg beast. It was named by one of our members' children who's interested in some Power Rangers character or other. And in fact, it looks sort of like a superhero or an Iron Man hand, and the kids love it. Kids who have perfectly good hands want one of these mechanical, plastic, brightly colored superhero hands. And that's, in fact, I think, part of the appeal and part of the impact of these things. That kid, the kid who used to be the weird kid with the funny hand, is now the coolest kid in the class. And whatever the physical benefits of wearing this are, the psychological benefits are probably quite significant.
I've watched a lot of your videos. You can see them at, enablingthefuture.org, and on Facebook at E-nabling. And you do need a lot of handkerchiefs, Kleenex, when you watch these videos because they're touching beyond imagination. What would you say, I don't know, what's the most heartwarming story that has come of your effort?
Oh, I don't know. We get thank you notes from children all the time, and from parents all the time, and from people who just think it is just wonderful that we've got all of these volunteers doing this for free. It's all really heartwarming. To me, actually, the community of friends and collaborators that has emerged, people sort of united by the notion that they can do something really cool and really good and give it away and have it have global impact, that sort of community has been the big surprise and personally the most gratifying thing to me. But you'll also have stories and notes and videos and letters that just make it clear that you're touching lives in a really nice and interesting way.
I've heard a few of the funnier stories. Why don't you share kind of amusing stories from this?
Sure. I've been telling stories about some of the kids. One of the interesting things is this collaborative community has done a spectacular job of generating new designs. But in recent months, as we're putting hands into the hands of more and more children, they themselves are becoming real developers. We have one kid whose name is Luke, whose father has made a hand with not one but two thumbs for a better grip. So the kid is known as Cool Hand Luke, and it's actually a really good idea. We had another kid named Tully who was asked, "What color do you want your hand?" And he said, "I'd like it to glow in the dark." And that's actually a really good idea. So that's the Tully hand. And then just a month or two ago, I was explaining this new arm design to young Derek, which didn't exist yet, but I was explaining the principle and so on. And while I'm sort of working over the mechanism, he put two demo arms together and he said, "I want my arm to be this long, about 50% longer than his regular arm." And it's a really good idea. He can pick things up off the floor. He can reach the highest shelf. He's a superhero. Which is to say that the idea that you're trying to look for something that resembles a natural hand may be a rather quaint 20th century assumption. The kids recognize that they can enhance themselves with these things and they can become part of the creation process.
And I dare say that no committee of experts would have come up with these unusual designs. It's a very organic, individual sort of thing. We've got a team of researchers here who are deeply interested in technology of all sorts, and I in particular in technological developments all across healthcare. And there's so many new technologies either just coming on stream or about to. 3D printed hearts and livers and kidneys, wearable telemetry so that doctors can monitor your blood pressure all day, state-of-the-art data mining. But what's really fascinating about your model is the crowdsourcing aspect of it. So, just doing a little blue sky here, what can you imagine the lessons for the future of healthcare that have come from your little experiment?
Well, I think we have demonstrated, first of all, that there is a virtual army, which is a virtual army of talented, motivated, creative volunteers who can make real contributions at zero cost that can really change and improve lives. They're doing it just because it's cool, it's interesting, and it's rewarding, and they're doing it using tools that are miraculously available for free or at little cost. That is a huge resource. And in the long run, I wonder whether E-nable is going to be most significant for just having demonstrated that there is this resource to be tapped into, comprised of thousands or tens of thousands, or frankly, in the long term, I think hundreds of thousands or millions of people who can now begin making real contributions to areas that were formerly restricted to the halls of academe or the corridors of industry. I use the phrase helping hands for the global village, and they are skilled hands. And by the way, including skilled hands received from E-nable. One of the lines I'm playing around with these days is I give a kid a hand like this, and I say, now, with great hands comes great responsibility. I want you to use your new abilities to start coming up with even better inventions for other kids and other grown-ups. And they believe it, and they have reason to believe it.
You can see it in their eyes in your videos. One of the other fascinating aspects of your model is, the use of the ingenuity of people who are very young. Anyone who watches progress on the web knows a lot of the really brilliant inventions, the brilliant apps come from 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds.
62-year-olds.
Yeah, I'm pretty close, just behind. One of your videos has a design professor who is, I don't know how old he was, he looks fairly youngish, in his 30s or 40.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, and he's saying that the real innovations are coming from his undergraduate students because in some sense he's too old already to really have quite the spark. And one thing looking at the sort of sociology of healthcare industries is we do tend to rely a lot on considerably older people to come up with the ingenious ideas and sort of waste the human capital of the young ones.
Yep. Well, I think that's right. But I got to see, speaking for a certain demographic, the interesting thing, and it's very clear in E-nable, is that creativity doesn't know age differences. What you're pointing out is that there's a vast reservoir of creativity to be found in people ages, 6 to 16. But we also have amateurs and professionals of all ages who are collaborating with those kids and making real contributions as well. So I think it's even more encouraging than the notion that we can hand the future off to the kids. It means that the old-timers actually get to collaborate and contribute on an equal footing.
One thing, certainly the people involved in this come from outside of the mainstream of healthcare and the medical sector.
Most, but not all, that's right.
Most, but not all, but bringing in the ingenuity that outsiders bring. And I always like to compare it to, Jeff Bezos devising Amazon from out of nowhere. The people in garages coming up with the products that change the world.
That's right. That's right. And interestingly, with the business models that change the world. Bezos is an example. There are lots of other examples. E-nable is still trying to figure out what its so-called business model is, but we are already having a global impact on the premise that we will give these things away for free. And some of our designers who own their own designs are quite committed to the proposition that no one shall pay and that their designs must not be charged for when they're put into practice. Other people say industry propels innovation and distribution forward. They're all possible, and it's really interesting to see how it's developing.
Would you like to put in a little plug for viewers who might be interested in participating in E-nable?
Well, sure. The go-to site, just to get a feel for what we do, is enablingthefuture.org. It's a website. You don't need membership. There's a Facebook page, as you mentioned, and if you really want to become a part of the community of world changers, you'll want to follow either of those links into the Google Plus community called E-nable. And there you will find 1,200 members today who are all just bubbling away, producing new innovations, or saluting those who produce new innovations, or building hands, or telling stories of children who've received hands. And it's really quite an interesting community and spectacle. And there is something for almost anyone to do. We would welcome monetary contributions, because we're doing this all on goodwill and fumes. We would welcome contributions of time, contributions of skill, contributions of goodwill. It all seems to somehow find a way of being put to use.
Thanks. Any other last words?
With great hands comes great responsibility.
Terrific. Thank you so much, John. It's been a pleasure to have you here all day.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.